Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
Hello, welcome back to Fighting on Film. Now this week, in the wake of Angela Lansbury's passing, we were talking about Bedknobs and Broomsticks on the FOF Twitter. And the response to the movie was just overwhelming. And we had such an interesting chat that we thought we couldn't just leave it there. We thought we'd have to do an episode dedicated to that movie. So here we are. Here's our, without further ado.
Let's dive into the greatest war movie ever made.
I mean, actually, but before we go on...
Greatest Disney war movie ever made? I don't know.
Yeah, probably. It's up there. Maybe. Greatest war movie of the 70s?
Greatest war movie involving a witch.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go there. We won't annoy the Bridge Too Far fans. But Matt's been away in America, if you didn't know.
I have. Yeah, off at a conference.
Yeah.
Talking about firearms history. So what better way to get back into the gist of things with a show about Bedknobs and Broomsticks?
Oh, I know, right? Put the jet lag aside. Just get back on the FOF train. It never stops.
it literally doesn't.
Production?
Yeah.
So, of course, it's a Disney production, as we all know, as you're probably all well aware. But the film was actually based upon a book called The Magic Bedknob, Bonfires and Broomsticks by Mary Norton. And that movie was released in the mid-1940s. And Disney snapped up the rights to that book almost immediately on the book's publication because they wanted to make Mary Poppins quite famously, but they were in a rights dispute with P.L. Travers. But, this movie was being developed from the 1940s onwards. And then when they finally did get the rights to Mary Poppins was the film that, was made first because there was also some limitations at the time, some Disney execs and Walt Disney himself. Disney thought the film was the book was unmakeable. You couldn't translate what was on the pages to film at the time.
Right, I see.
Just because of limitations, I think, of their studio. However, as time went on, it became easy to do the sorts of things that they do in the movie with the
live action and animation melded together and stuff.
And Mary Poppins had shown how good that looks. So, this movie is developed after. And then it's a sort of, some people are mean to it, saying, "Oh, it's just a Mary Poppins knockoff," or it's it's clearly just trying to recapture the same sort of beats. But I don't think
it's a bit cruel. It's very much its own thing, isn't it?
I think there's some parallels, but then again, I don't think there are as many parallels as other people want there to be. Yeah. So anyway, but talk about the production staff. It was directed by Robert Stevenson, working on loads of Disney films, Old Yeller, The Love Bug, and obviously Mary Poppins in 1964. And that's, one of his big films, obviously, huge film for Disney at the time. And this one was written by Bill Walsh and Don DeGrady, and they were, long-time Disney collaborators. They wrote Mary Poppins. They also wrote The Shaggy Dog, Son of Flubber, The Love Bug, all these really, sort of really popular live-action films.
Classic Disney live-action stuff.
Yeah, proper, that 50s, 60s classic Disney era. And the songs were written by the Sherman Brothers. All the songs of Mary Poppins were theirs. And, if you've heard a Disney movie, you've heard the Sherman Brothers. They're just, an absolute mainstay. And the movie was filmed, Bedknobs was filmed entirely at Walt Disney Studios. Everything was built from scratch, on sound stages. Extensive use of matte paintings for the landscapes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The whole village of Peppering Eyes. I think it uses there's that castle down in Dorset or Somerset, one or the other, and then everything else is just painted.
That's it. Yeah, you can tell as well. I think back in the times before, 4K and Blu-ray.
I mean, as a kid, when I watched it, I don't remember going, "That's a painting."
No, I did it extensively when I was watching for this. But I had my sort of critical head on, and I was like, "That U-boat's a matte painting." But the Portobello Road sequence was entirely built from scratch on a soundstage, Soundstage 2, actually. And at the time, it was the largest and most expensive set built by Disney. So there's some proper
Like
money going into this.
4 streets worth, wasn't it, or something
It's
crazy like that?
incredible. Yeah, but Disney never do things by halves, do they?
No,
They never
no.
have. And the film uses Ulb Iwerks sodium screen vapor process to mix the live action actors in with the animation,
Ah,
and that had been done in Mary Poppins, and that's like an early green screen.
hmm.
And there's a really good, it's on the D23 website, which is a Disney fan website, and there's some great behind the scenes photos of them doing the sodium screen vapor process, and it's just how the puppetry syncs up, and the floors are real sets, but then everything around them would be animated in after. It's really seamless. Like it's still so seamless. It doesn't look bad. It doesn't look hokey.
Yeah.
It's
The
just
only
classic.
time where it doesn't look great is during the transitions in the football match, where it goes from him getting run over by the football team to him being on the floor,
Yeah, it's
and
a
there's
little bit.
they're a little bit hokey. But I mean, we'll talk about the end sequence, the
Yes,
climax of
we
the movie
will.
later on. But that's incredible for the time the film was made.
The film was nominated for 5 Academy Awards at the 1972 Oscars, and it won for Best Visual Effects. I mean, obviously, for the
Hmm.
time, this one's really great. And it was actually the last Disney branded film to win an Oscar until 1989's The Little Mermaid.
Oh wow, didn't know that.
Yeah, it did,
Hmm.
and that movie in itself, actually, Little Mermaid, did kick off that Disney renaissance of the 90s.
Yeah, I suppose it did. Yeah,
Mm.
Aladdin and all that, Hercules and all
Yeah,
those
I've seen some people
animated movies.
argue that the Bedknobs and Broomsticks was the last classic era Disney movie, and then
All right.
the 70s and 80s are sort of like the wilderness era, and then the
Hmm.
90s are the resurgence. But it depends who you ask. I think
Yeah, I can understand the theory there. Yeah,
by and large, I think it's not. I don't think that 70s 80s period is necessarily a dark era for Disney. It's just not. They're not on top anymore.
yeah, yeah.
Mm. But anyway, so moving on, the movie was released on the 8th of October 1971 in the UK, and then on the 11th of November in the US. And the budget was 6.3 million, and the box office take was 17.9, and countless millions on rentals as well from that
Yeah.
time.
It's
And then
become timeless.
it has, yeah, it really has. And the film was restored in 1996, and that added lost songs such as With Flair and A Step in the Right Direction. However, A Step in the Right Direction isn't added into the movie because the film sequence of that was lost. So that is available to watch as like they use background, so they use behind the scenes photos to show
All
how that
right.
sequence would look.
Mm.
And you can watch that on YouTube, and it's a extra feature on the DVD, but it's not in the movie.
Mm.
And it made that restoration made the Portobello Road sequence longer. They used faded print, digitally restored it, and the version that I watched is the Disney Plus version that has some of the lost songs in it.
Oh, cool. Yeah, there's a bit with like the clothes seller that they added back in, I think.
Yeah, mm,
That bit there, because it kind of like just fades into it.
that's
It's
it.
like a not a flush transition. You can see that it's been added back in,
Mm,
I think.
yeah, you can. And it's watching there's a great little behind the scenes documentary I watched that was around the time of the 96 re-release. I think it was 90, might have actually been 98 actually. It was like a Disney Channel thing. And they
Yeah.
showed some of the original rushes and how they'd been, that when they cut halfway and you can see the
Hmm.
original to the restored. It looked really great.
Yeah.
But as always, we love to see what the people thought back in the day. So we have Arthur Thrickle of the Daily Mirror yet again from October the 8th, 1971. And he says, Bedknobs and Broomsticks is a skillful mixture of human and cartoon characters, a film featuring splendid magical effects and a gloriously funny soccer match played by cartoon animals. The musical numbers may not have the melodic syrup of Mary Poppins, but the dances are staged with verve and the story combines humour, romance, wartime nostalgia, and a highly original battle sequence. The setting is England in 1940. Three cockney kids, evacuated to a remote coastal village, stay with an elegant eccentric called Egalentine Price. And that is a mouthful.
That's a fair
Yeah,
review. Yeah, it is. A Galentine is a bit of a mouthful. That's a fair review. I agree. It has charm to it.
it really does. It really does. And it's weird because this movie for me, it's like I know it's set in the war, but it's really hard to like think of it as a war film for
It's
me.
not a war movie, and
No, it's set
we're
in the war.
stretching
Yeah,
the definition of fighting on film here a little bit, but I
we
think
are.
it's worth it for this.
There's some great. The thing is, the reason we're doing this episode is because there are some great things that this movie does in regards
Yes,
to its representation of the Second World War, and we'll get onto that
there's
later.
interesting elements that we're going to talk about in a moment for sure.
Yeah.
Like the Home Guard and the Portobello Road scene, battle sequence. There's interesting callbacks as well, which I want to touch on in a bit. But I guess I'll head into cast. Oh no, we've got the one-way reviews.
Yes, we do. So
Before
David
I jump the gun,
Sue Warrior 55 says wonderful. Der in Slaffer from Germany, he says Portobello. MRC 1966 says fun. Matt Bone goes with armor. David Current goes with memories. Brad Holloway says Duke. That'll become clear later. Dan Brazil says Nabumbu. And Hannah at Rumble Dolly says childhood. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? That's the overarching thing.
Most importantly, what did Ernie make of it?
He didn't watch it. He was in playgroup.
Oh, so you're sat at home watching Disney movies and Ernie's at playgroup.
We've tried. The thing is, we've tried with the live action ones, and you don't really grab him. He's a Winnie the Pooh guy. He loves a bit of Winnie the Pooh. And I think that's the thing with this movie is that I think for a certain group of people, it really captures that. It captures the childhood memories. And that is the thing with Disney, isn't it? It's inherently linked to our childhood with anyone
Well, it
that
is.
you say.
I mean, we've said this before, but there's kind of a parallel here. Whereas Disney movies, and then for a lot of people, war movies are both really linked into childhood memories.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing.
No, you're right. It's almost like it's something about them. I think it's something about how they used to be on like BBC Two in the afternoons. War movies did, and then if you're lucky on a bank holiday, they'd put a Disney on.
Yeah.
If you were really lucky. So I think they don't go hand in hand. That's the wrong word, the wrong phrase. No. But they have something about them. They've got this. There's this nostalgic feeling about them, especially when we're talking like 50s, 60s era films. I think there's just like it's a nucleus there for some people that it sparks either a career of liking military history or just tapping into that nostalgia there. But no, I really like those one-word reviews. And as I said, like at the start of the episode, the feedback just from mentioning Bedknobs and Broomsticks once was incredible.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I think we had like 250 likes or something on 90 replies on can you guess what the next week's movie is going to be? And I was inundated. My phone was pinging off like no one's business. I was like, oh my Lord,
Do follow us at Fighting on Film on Twitter.
Yeah, please do.
All the social media is available.
Yes, it is.
So that takes us into cast, I think.
It does.
So, of course, we've got to start off with Angie herself. Angela Lansbury plays Miss Egalentine Price, who is a amateur witch in search of the back end of a spell that has been evading her. And along the way, she gets embroiled with some cockney kids and ends up fighting off a small Nazi invasion, as you do.
All in a day's work for Jessica Fletcher.
Yeah. And of course, that's probably what she's best known for, her years of work on Murder, She Wrote. But she was a career actress from the 1940s onwards. So she had an expansive career that included Three Musketeers in 1948, Mutiny in 1952, and of course, The Manchurian Candidate in 1962, which a lot of people forget about. And The Lady Vanishes in 1979. And they're some of the other films that touch a little bit on conflict and espionage. But the film had resonance for her, I think, because she evacuated London as a teen as well. So she moved to New York, not quite the countryside, but I think there was a resonance there for her. And interestingly, on that D23 website you mentioned earlier, Robert, there was a little quote of a note that she wrote to the producer, Bill Walsh. And it said, "I think the script has many marvelous facets, character humor, heart, and an opportunity for rare inventiveness in so many areas. And the songs Dick and Bob have written for Egalentine are charming and just what was needed. So all things being equal, I do hope I'm your girl," which I really liked. I thought that was really nice. Yeah.
And it's because she didn't exactly fight Julie Andrews for the role, but I know Julie Andrews was their main choice because of Mary Poppins, and she turned it down, didn't she? And then
she was in line for it. Yeah, I believe. Yeah,
and then right at the end, she was like, "Oh no, I will do it," and they were like, "Oh no, no, we've got Angela
we've already
Lansbury."
cast Angie. Yeah,
Yeah.
But we can't do a show about Angela Lansbury without me just dropping in this little fun fact. So in 1990, she actually wrote a book called Angela Lansbury's Positive Moves: My Personal Plan for Fitness and Well-Being. Now, this was accompanied. I found out about this through Lauren, my partner, who told me about an episode of the Maintenance Phase, which is like a health and fitness critique podcast, which is
I don't
really
know where
fun.
this is going, listeners.
Yeah, no, just go with it, Rob. Anyway, so Lauren was telling me about this episode of Maintenance Phase, which talks about Angela Lansbury's like health and fitness book, which is great. You can check that out. It's actually quite funny and insightful.
Late 90s. Early 90s fitness frenzy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She was one of the first, in fact. So from the 90s onwards, there was a whole glut of fitness VHS and videos and that kind of thing. But Angela's is actually online on YouTube, which you can go and watch. And it is probably the most wholesome thing you'll watch next to Bedknobs and Broomsticks, because she's just lovely in it. And she's talking about her experience with exercise and healthy eating and her history. She talks about being on the theatre, talks about her mother taking her to Hyde Park, or I think it was, or Regent's. Anyway, takes her to a park in London in the early 40s, late 30s, where she joins a women's fitness group, one of the first women's fitness groups.
Oh, wow, okay.
They exercise in the park and stuff. It's really nice. Yeah. It literally is the most 90s thing imaginable. There's some surreal bits in there where she's just in her living room lying on the floor doing like heel kicks. And then there's a bit where she's in the bath talking about being an active elderly sexual person, which is kind of jarring. The whole thing is really interesting just to watch. So I just thought I'd throw that in there as a little extra Angela factoid.
The tangents are mad on this episode.
I know this episode's a bit it's a bit wild. Okay,
this is the anomaly. This is like our bath salt phase. This is. But no, this thing about Angela Lansbury, though, before we move on, I was really shocked when she, when the
she's
news
an
outlet
icon.
said she passed away, because I used to do at my nan's every weekend. I used to go, and there's always would be repeats of Murder, She Wrote, and I'd always watch them. It was Diagnostics Murder with Dick Van Dyke, and then it was Murder,
if only there was
a
war movie crossover we could do to discuss Diagnosis Murder, because that show is insane.
Well, there was there Lieutenant Robinson Crusoe NV?
Oh yeah, no, he is in that one.
Yeah, that's Dick Van Dyke.
That's a Disney movie, right? That's a Disney movie. Yeah.
That's maybe we could do that down the line sometime.
Yeah, maybe.
But it's just the thing, like,
Murder.
It goes with that nostalgia thing for me. It's like one of my biggest memories of going to my nan's before she passed away was Murder, She Wrote with Angela Lansbury. So it's nice. She's just one of those really wholesome actors.
Yeah, Murder, She Wrote, Columbo, Diagnosis Murder.
It's that era of like.
I wonder if there's kids in America right now watching reruns of Midsummer Murders.
Maybe.
And having the same experience. I really hope not, because they don't deserve that.
They were that. It's like a 2-hour marathon now. I can't do Midsummer Murders.
Anyway, we said no more tangents, Rob. We said no. We've tangented it. We've gone tangential again.
What a war movie podcast.
we're going full tangential. Like just off the chain right now. Anyway, so David Tomlinson plays Mr. Emilius Brown, who is a kind of a showman, professor. Not all he's portrays him to be. He's kind of a
bit of a con man.
Bit of a con man, yeah. And Dave Tomlinson was a flight lieutenant with the RAF during the war. And apparently Peter Ustinov was offered the role of Mr. Brown. Yeah. Ron Moody was originally cast.
Wasn't she like Lansbury's brother-in-law anyway, or went on to become?
Ustinov, I think.
Yeah.
I read that somewhere. Yeah.
That'd have been a great way ahead connection.
It would have been. Tomlinson was in Pimpernel Smith in 1941, The Way to the Stars in 45, I See a Dark Stranger in 46, and The Wooden Horse in 1950. The Escape movie.
I'd forgotten he was in that. And then when I was
I had too.
I was like, fucking hell, he is. I was like, oh my God.
Good. We've managed to get fuck into a podcast about a Disney film.
Oh God, yeah. Don't let the kids listen. I just swore.
So then we've got Ian Whale and Roy Snart, who played Charlie and Paul Rawlins, the two little boys. And they never acted in TV or film again after this. This was their one role. And I think they were
really
quite
good
good.
at it.
Yeah, they were great.
They're so
good little
cheeky
child
and
actors.
like, funny. Yeah.
Yeah. Cindy O'Callaghan played Carrie Rawlins, and she did lots of TV. I think she was in EastEnders for a long time. Lots of TV over here in the UK. Roddy McDowall plays Mr. Rowan Jelk, the vicar. Then we've got a great little cameo from Bruce Forsyth as
So
Swinburne, the spiv,
so good.
and his pocket knife.
Yeah.
John Erickson played Colonel Heller, the leader of the German raiding party. Reginald Owen portrays Major General Tiegler, who is the commander of the Home Guard platoon.
Yeah.
And he was in a whole series of war movies and lots of other movies from the 30s onwards.
He was Admiral Boone as well.
He was, and I was about to get to that. So he was in Mrs. Miniver in 1942, Reunion in France, same year, Assignment in Brittany, 1943, Salute to the Marines in 1943, The Three Musketeers, which also starred Angela Lansbury. Darby's Rangers in 1958, and of course, as Rob mentioned, he was Admiral Bloom in Mary Poppins in 1964. Rounding out the cast, we have Arthur Gould Porter, who plays the Home Guard inspecting officer that is trying to find the platoon, and
that's in the restored scenes version. That's not in the original cut. Yeah, that was restored in.
And then we have an interesting cameo from Hank Warden as an old Home Guard soldier, and you can see him marching in the ranks in a couple of the scenes, and he was in a load of really big John Wayne movies and westerns because he was a cowboy. So this is a really odd thing for him to appear in. So he was in Stagecoach, Fort Apache, Red River, The Alamo, The Searchers, McClintock, True Grit. He was in name a John Wayne movie, and he appeared in it basically.
The CBs. You said name a movie.
No,
and I just did.
No, he wasn't in that one, Rob. Damn. Okay.
Foiled you. And Jessica Fletcher proud.
I just thought I mentioned him because he's like on the right hand side of the three files that are marching when the Home Guard are introduced. He's got a bit of a beard, I think, but he's a very tall man. Instantly recognizable if you know who Hank Warden is, and that basically rounds out the cast.
There's no duff casting in it because it's just.
No, I think Tomlinson brings a lot of humor to the role.
Yeah, he's just great. He's probably one of those
Lansbury
proper
is brilliant. She delivers it perfectly on the where she needs to be straight faced. She's great where she needs to inject a little bit of humor. Just great performance.
I do. I often think David Tomlinson would have been a really good Doctor Who in that era.
Oh yeah, that's a good shout. Yeah,
just the way he acts and the way he's very showman-like. He reminds me of Patrick Troughton's Doctor. I think that's why. And I just often think, could have got a really nice, really interesting take there. But then he was making really good money being in lots of Disney movies. So would you needed to
like Love Bug and stuff, and
Before we move on, there's a great little thing on if you've got Disney Plus, there's a great little snippet of him singing Portobello Road. And it's really good. Just with the Sherman Brothers there, just a really nice little bit of archive footage. It's really nice to see.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
I love it. So maybe, and I never thought I'd say this ever in my life, but we should move on to the alley tally for Bedknobs and Broomsticks.
Let's do it.
It's time for Alley Tally on Fighting on Film.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we get that whole sequence with the museum, and the battle sequence at the end is probably my favorite scene, and we'll talk about that more, I'm sure. And I'll explain why it's actually my favorite scene from childhood Matt's perspective.
I think it's everyone's favorite scene, really.
Yeah, it's great. But I know that you'll probably have a little bit to say about the Home Guard and the
Yes.
Germans, but just picking out some of the museum pieces, we've got English halberds, a two-handed battle axe, brown bess muskets. I think you don't really get a good look at them. Bowman, and Angela has a saber.
Yes, great. And a Brody. She's wearing a Brody helmet.
And a Brody and a Mark One broomstick. I couldn't identify the saber exactly. It looks like a French light cavalry saber, but not quite.
Well, I know that all of the suits of armor were used on Camelot and El Cid.
Yeah, apparently so. And there's some sources that say they're authentic, which maybe they were made.
Just priceless medieval suits of armor being
maybe they were made. I don't think they're authentic originals. But they look good. They're great. There's an interesting mix of late European medieval, and Eastern European medieval, which I guess the El Cid bit kind of comes from. Because for some reason they went with a very Eastern European armor feel for the El Cid, which is set in Spain. But I'm not an expert in armor, so I can't comment on that really. But yeah, we'll talk about that scene.
There's just something about it, isn't there? Yeah, it's great. So for me, I mean, it was the Home Guard, because at the moment I've been heavily researching the Home Guard again. I've been doing some writing, some articles about them, which will be published soon. But it's really interesting because they're a really, really well armed Home Guard unit. I went really in depth on this. I took it quite seriously. I'm not saying Matt didn't, but I just thought it'd be interesting to talk about the representation of the Home Guard in film, because there's not many representations of the Home Guard that aren't Dad's Army. And this might
sadly
be
this is a little bit Dad's Army-esque, but
it is, but it's not awful. I mean,
no,
I don't think it's shockingly bad. They are a little bit old, anachronistic in places, but it's not awful. I like the sentiment to it. You know, it's like we're the boys of the old brigade, and that early sort of Home Guard era was a little bit, was a little bit made up of the old heads coming together, trying to help. So it's not out of the realms of possibility. But just to talk about their kit very briefly, they've got 1940 pattern battle dress tunics with the buttons visible. They've got short magazine Enfields. They've got side-by-side shotguns. I think one of them's got maybe like a Webley hunting rifle. Something like that.
There's like a Mauser action hunting rifle.
Yeah, something like that.
I think I saw a Martini carbine.
Yeah. And
a possible Remington rolling block.
Oh, nice. I didn't notice that.
But it could have been a single shotgun. It's kind of really hard to see.
So there's two that are armed with shovels and a broomstick handle, which isn't wrong.
There's a pitchfork in there too, I think.
Yeah, so I crunched the numbers, and I think there's about 15 or 16 of them.
Yes.
So they are 75% armed with firearms. Which is incredibly high for a Home Guard unit.
Yes, it is.
In 1940.
So August 1940, they're 3 months after being renamed the Home Guard from the LDV. They are, at least 4 of them are in battle dress, with SMLEs, no webbing.
No, they've got 37 pattern.
Have they?
They've got a mixture of 37 pattern webbing, and they've got a mixture of gas mask bags and 37 small packs. So I think for a representation of the Home Guard, from probably they're not going for a massive accurate thing. It's actually got it quite well, because depending where you were was where stuff was rushed. So if you see a photo of, there's some really good photos of lads in Dorset, and they've got Brens and the Enfields and Thompsons, and it makes sense because that's where the invasion was expected to be fought back. So they've got better weaponry. Of them in London
too, with very well armed.
Yeah, you look
obviously they're propaganda photographs, so they might not have had all of those weapons seen in the photographs all of the time. Usual caveats apply with those.
Yes, it does, but it's not bad. I mean, I only noticed it on a second watch through. All of the slings are American slings.
Oh, good eye! Didn't notice that.
It's a really, really good eye.
I was impressed they got them SMLEs.
Yeah, it was great. You see them fire them as well.
You do?
They could have turned up a little bit earlier in the last battle, but
It could have done a bit more. Yeah.
They're all old. They're having 40 winks. But I just thought it'd be interesting to say this little fact. So obviously I was talking about them being 75% armed, and that is really good numbers because in the late summer, early autumn of 1940, the War Office calculated that from the 1.6 million Home Guard volunteers, on a good day, at least 740,000 would not have personal weapons in the event of an invasion. So when you look at when you think of that's another thing as well, that means we're going into like proper history chat now, but it's a good jumping off point just to talk about Home Guard.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's interesting that in this movie they're really well armed, because I think that's something that is lost in the Home Guard, in like what we think of the Home Guard as. They're still in quite dire straits armed wise, weapons wise, probably up until about mid 41.
Yes.
And those first 3 months were quite touch and go, whether they would have fought damn hard. There's no, if you read like people's personal accounts and things like that, they're raring for a fight, but they just didn't have the means for it. So you see this regionalized use of logistics and equipment up and down the UK. The closer you get to the coast, the probably better armed you are.
It just happens that Peppering Eye was a heavily armed village.
Yeah,
those lads were tooled.
Exactly,
anyway,
I suppose I just thought it was interesting to talk about.
No, that is interesting, and it's. I had it all in my notes too. Well, I had the weapons in my notes, and I did a pretty detailed look over and watched the same scene about 7 times just to see what was in there.
It's like this week's been mad.
But what they're up against is the Wehrmacht.
Yes,
and they're armed with everything you would expect to see. So MP40s, MG34, P38 pistols. One chap has a Gewehr 98 rather than a K98 rifle.
That's like a trope, though. I think that's a really nice little, like, 60s, 70s trope of when you have German troops, you've got to have a Gewehr 98 rifle.
Yeah. There's a certain thing you can tick off. Absolutely. Yeah. Did you notice the Panzerfausts?
No, they're Panzerfausts.
Yes. So anachronistic Panzerfausts are in the weapons and ammunition dump that they blow up at the end.
Right.
There's a mortar or two, and then there's a couple of mocked up Panzerfausts.
See, in my head, I always thought they fired the mortars at. My brain told me they always fired those mortars. When you've got a thing, you just think you've seen that. And I had to watch it a couple of times. I was like, they shoot those mortars at Angela Lansbury, don't they? But they don't. I just, in my head, I was like, well, it confused me.
Well, I had a similar thing where my childhood memory was that she was downed by MG34 ground fire.
Yes.
Not the explosion of the house. So, it's funny how the memory plays tricks like that.
Bit. It always makes me laugh because it makes me laugh when any movie does it. But it's less. You don't get it as much now, just because there's you can do an effect like that a lot easier. But when she does get the backblast of the explosion, flies her off her broom, you can just tell it's a dummy, like falling.
Oh yeah.
And it just gets me every single time.
It's just like a dead
dead
rag doll just flying through the air.
It's just so funny. It's just because the cut is so seamless on it. Oh, it just gets me every time. That's one of my memories from this movie as well. It's just that sequence is just fantastic. And it's PG. I would say PG, like depiction of warfare is really interesting as well.
It is.
Just, we can show people getting bonked on the head with mallets and malices. Is it a malice? Mace, sorry. We can show people getting bonked on the head with a mace. And I'm laughing when I'm a child, like, haha, the German got bonked on the head. But then when I was watching it as an adult, I'm like, he's got major brain problems now, that chap.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, it's quite violent, really. But it's done in such a safe way that you don't think of that. When you're a child. But it's such a good little sequence, isn't it? The puppet work is just exquisite.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah, no, it really is.
The sight gags are just so great. Like, when the armor takes the helmet off, and they chuggling
Shakes the
out,
bullets out.
shakes the bullets
Yeah.
out. Oh, it's just fantastic, isn't it? And the scale is brilliant as well.
Oh, it is. Yeah. I saw someone on IMDb put up a fact that said there was more armor on show in this film than there is in all the stately homes in Britain. That's not true. That's not true at all.
That's not true.
There's a
But it feels
lot of
like
armor
it.
in UK stately homes. Arms and
Yeah.
armor in UK stately homes is pretty widespread. But I thought that was a funny fact that someone had decided to include
It's a
on
great
IMDb.
Maybe they thought that because there's that really nice painting of like the scale of the army.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
that's what he
Where
thought
they're
that
all
was real.
silhouetting on the ridge line. Yeah,
It's great. It's so good.
definitely not hard targets, but
It's like a it's like a Helm's Deep like
yeah,
scale thing. It's fantastic. And I like
I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to move on to favorite scenes because obviously
We're getting into
both
that,
dying to talk about that scene.
Ironically, I mean, we're sticking to the war movie thing a bit, but the animated soccer match is really great animation wise. But because I was a child and grew up with commando books and stuff, I was like, "Get to the battle! Come on!" I think I had my videos trained on like I could hit the fast forward and hit the play when they when the Germans got on the beach, and I was like, "Here we go." So I think we should go into favourite scenes.
Hello, I'm Al Murray, and you're listening to Fighting on Film, the world's #1 war film podcast.
So, Rob, favourite scenes, what have you got?
So obviously we're coming off talking about the battle, but I do think it's important that we talk about the Portobello Road sequence, because I think that's one thing on Twitter that came up a lot.
Yeah.
And to quote, we have ways, an acronym for Duke, which I think stands for, I can't remember off the top of my head, I think it's Dominions, United Kingdom and Empire.
That's it. It's in Al's new book too, which hopefully we're going to be talking to him about in a future episode. But yeah, it's phenomenal. For a 1971 depiction of the British war effort, it's remarkably nuanced.
Yeah, like it's really incredible because, I think it only came to light after that restoration as well, because that becomes like a 9-minute sequence with a dance.
It's so colourful. Yeah.
It's really colourful, and it's not when that sequence starts, you think it's just going to be like a little song and dance number, but then it's really long and it brings in, I think, and I wrote it down. You get Australians, Scots, Trinidad troops, British Army, Navy, Air Force, and there might even be a couple that I'm missing out there. Indian as well, of course. Yes,
they're very prominent. Indian. There's Royal Navy, there's an ARP warden, there's Wrens, there's WAFs, there's RAF. Almost every service branch is highlighted there.
It's really interesting. And they come in and they play music of their own cultural heritage. And it's just such a great little sequence, such a melting pot of what the British war effort was actually made up of, not just plucky Tom. It's everyone who did pick up a rifle. You could almost argue that in its own way is also showing how many theatres of war were being fought. You've got the Far East, you've got the desert, you've got Europe as well. Not that it's meaning to, but in my head, I'm thinking, oh, good, that's the movie doing its bit to just show the Allied war effort. And the movie also, it's not, as we say, it's not a strict war movie, because if the movie sort of forgets for about an hour that it's even set in 1940, it doesn't really mean much to the plot until the end. But it's really good, and I don't think you have. I mean, quote me if I'm wrong, listeners, but I don't think there is a movie that shows that part of the Allied war effort in representation-wise. I don't think there is another film that does it.
No, it certainly feels very special in that it represents so many different aspects and so many different nationalities input into the war effort that it really stands out within the film itself.
Yeah, no, it does, and it's such a joyous little scene as well. It just puts a smile on my face. And I think I'm glad that they restored it, because that sequence might have been lost if they hadn't restored the movie in '96. And it's such a great little thing. It
wouldn't have been as prominent, that's for sure.
No, it wouldn't have. But then going back to the other of my favourite scenes, and I also, before we move on, I also really like the little Bayeux tapestry
I was going
homage
to
at the
mention that
start.
too in the introduction credits. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really nice. But obviously, going back to the battle scene, I mean, what haven't we said about it?
Interesting little tidbit for you. I did a little bit of reading around this, and there was a very interesting. So there's a historical basis for the film, actually.
Okay.
Especially this sequence. There was a very interesting lady called Dion Fortune from North Wales, who was the leader of the Fraternity of the Inner Light. She was an occultist, and she led this society of witches and people interested in magic. And she had her group manifest invisible helpers to protect Britain's coast.
Wow.
So I thought that was really interesting that it parallels the empty armor, the invisible helpers.
Get it. Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, it's cool. I almost wish there was more. I mean, I know I want there to be more from a kids' movie, but there could have been more, like from Lansbury's character at the start, trying to get in contact with the War Office and maybe being like rebuffed or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they could have done a little bit more there, but they didn't have to. Obviously, it's just in my head. I would like to have been her trying to, be, oh look, I can really help. And they go, no, it's all, it's all hocus pocus and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It could have been a nice little thing, and she,
could have been the sequel.
It could have been, yeah, that would be cool. Angela Lansbury on a landing craft tank in 44, commanding hordes of armor. Yeah, it'd be really interesting. But it's just a great little sequence about that, the ending there, what it can get away with, like kind of kids rating way of doing warfare, and it's just the thing of like the Germans' faces when they start shooting at the armor, and we're still in the period in the late 60s, early 70s. We're still in that period of commando books. We're still in that period of Victor comics, all things like that sort of paint the German troops as sort of bumbling fools. We're not really in a era yet of really re-evaluating the sort of German army like we are now. So it's just really interesting that it just chooses to make a mockery of them, because isn't that the best way of beating your villain, is to just make a mockery of them. So I think it's really interesting as well.
I think what captured it for me as a child was I love the idea of the museum coming alive.
Yeah.
I really love that because I loved museums as a kid, loved history as a kid. And the idea of the suits of armor and things coming to life and moving around and fighting one last battle really captured my imagination. And I still love how it has representations of various periods of military history.
Yeah, it's nice.
You've got medieval knights, you've got a cuirassier, you've got 18th century grenadiers, pikemen from the English Civil War, archers. They're not all particularly accurate in the uniforms and the depictions, but they're representative and you can see what they're going for, and it's thought-provoking. And I love that. I still love that.
Yeah, it's really cute.
That's the beauty of that scene. It is.
It's weird. I know it's a war film, but it's a battle sequence, but there's something really cozy about it. I think that's what is like old Disney movies, before all the conglomeratization of Disney and buying up every property they can, like that golden era from like the early 40s probably to the mid 70s. That golden era there it's just so cozy. I could always go back to it. My missus is a huge Mary Poppins fan. It's one of the the sort of forming movies of her childhood there, and it's, as well as that, this movie as well for me was one of the movies where I'm like, oh cool, there's a Disney film but it's got warfare in it, but it felt special. It's such an weird feeling to like attach to a movie that we don't attach to other war movies in the same way. It's just such a really interesting sort of feeling. I get a feeling from this movie that I don't get.
It's that popular consciousness of the understanding of the war. I think it plays into that, and it's the warm side of that, where there's humor and there's laughter, and a stick grenade blows a horse apart, but it puts itself back together in a funny way. There's lots of humor within that sequence. You talked about the German getting hit on the head by the mace. There's the huge battle axe that cuts the MG34 barrel in two.
Yeah.
The bullets
Armourers up
being...
and down the country winced when that happened. I was saying
Hopefully it was
it's got
a
a
mock-up.
couple of grand of machine gun there,
Yeah.
wrecked, whatever.
Fingers crossed it was a mock-up.
Hopefully.
But yeah, there's lots of little bits within that
Yeah.
that are humorous, and that lightens the mood. So it's still a Disney movie, but it's dealing with a very serious conflict. There's a couple of parallels I wanted to touch on, which I thought were interesting from that. So it's not a full invasion. It's a little exercise is what Colonel Heller, I think, describes it as to Egalentine. And it begins with an old lad that's brewing up near the beach, and he's jumped. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite... I remember watching that. I was like, oh, that's quite...
Doesn't even get a brew before he stands too, Rob.
No, he doesn't. No.
Still need to put that on a t-shirt.
Why is he not on... Where's his mate? Should be watching him twos.
They've already got him. Rob. Those damn Nazis.
You don't see him again.
No. Hopefully he's all right.
That. Yeah, maybe. I kind of like that the home guard at the end get their little... They're already retreating. What I don't like it, actually, they get their little... their moment at the end where they come in and the Germans are retreating back to the submarine, and they fire off a couple of salvos. Yeah. And then they act like they've won. They act like they did it all. They always make me laugh. So I'm like,
it's a bit funny, isn't it?
That's another thing with the home guard.
Well, at least the home guard actually get to fire a shot in anger.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's something. Another parallel was we get massive Miss Grant goes to the door vibes when the Germans arrive at the farm. So she opens the door to put the cat out. Yeah, went the day well as well. She opens the door to put the cat out, and two Germans appearing at her over the brick wall of the farmyard. So there's interesting little parallels there that maybe were thought of at the time, but maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, when they're in the house with Lansbury and the kids, that's quite tense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that when I was little. I remember that being quite scary because Katie said that. My wife, when we were watching it, the executive producer, she was like, "This bit always scared me. Something about this bit that it was quite sinister for about
Nazis
10 minutes."
Being in your house. And it goes straight back to this. Miss Grant goes to the door. If you haven't seen that episode, listeners, do go back to episode 1 of Fighting on Film, where you can find that episode 2. Sorry, where you can find us discussing the really interesting propaganda movie made by the Ministry of Information that deals with a German fifth columnist and parachutists. Very interesting.
Well, we shouldn't end this episode by mentioning Disney kept itself afloat during the Second World War by making propaganda movies. So there is a nice little connection there.
Yeah, and training films, like there's that amazing animated. We should do that actually for a show. There's a boys anti-tank rifle Canadian Disney movie, which is really good.
Donald Duck, isn't it? Shooting boys.
I think so. Yeah,
it's great.
So. Yeah, we need to do that.
We do. We should do that one. Do boys anti-tanking film. Be a short one, but be a good one.
Oh yeah, there you go. That's a good one. 9 men crack that tank.
Yeah, we always come back to 9 men. Always. We should buy the rights at this point. We love it that much.
I would happily buy the rights and just tour that around the country.
Roll up.
We're going tangential again, Rob. We're going tangential.
We are, sorry. Yeah.
But I guess that takes us into final thoughts.
What more can you say about Bedknobs and Broomsticks? It's just a classic. It is one of the Disney classics, isn't it? And it's when, I didn't think of it for a while because, hustle and bustle of life and all that. But when Angela Lansbury passed away, I was thinking this movie. I was thinking Saturdays at my nan's watching Murder, She Wrote. And it's just, that's the word cozy is coming back. It's just one of them cozy
and he's going to love
movies.
it in a couple of years' time.
Yeah. And it is one of those movies where you can sit down, with your kids and just enjoy it. And there's something in it for us, to use another We Have Ways term, afflicted. If you're afflicted like some of us military history fans are, and historians among us, like it's we can enjoy it with your family and go, look, this is why I like what I like, because there's movies like this. Yeah, it's all formative stuff.
You can sit there and tell Annie, well, although it's set in August 1940 and the actual Blitz on London didn't begin until September, and although she does say we're getting these poor children away from the bombings, it's okay because it's historical license. It doesn't matter.
The Peppering Eye Home Guard is 75% armed, Ernest.
Yeah.
You'll be like, Dad,
Dad, stop, please.
Films ruined you, Dad.
Yeah.
Just enjoy the movie.
What they should actually have here is broomsticks with knives tied to them and Molotov cocktails.
Where's the Type 76 grenades?
Also, I will throw in that Mr. Brown joins the Irish Guards at the end of the film.
Oh, does he? I always wondered what regiment it was.
I did pause it, and I think I had a close look at the cap badge he's wearing is Irish Guards.
And he should be joining the Home Guard, really. I don't think
he should be at his age. And for the longest time, I just assumed he was, and I was always confused about why he was saying his farewells just to go off and do like a Home Guard exercise. But they're obviously giving him a send off to the station.
Because I always thought that would have made a better ending. Because I thought, obviously by that time, him and
Egalentine
are like, they've got a little bit of romance going on. So I always thought it would have been nice of him to go, my time to patrol the coast again. Yeah. And she could go, I'll see you later. It would have been a nice little ending. But they don't do that. I always thought
it's slightly different.
Because I always thought he was Home Guard at the end. My brain was probably not even engaged at the words when I was little.
And I'll also just mention the inspecting officer who encounters a villager that's painting over the signs.
Nice. I like that. And he asks, good inclusion.
Where's can you direct me to Peppering Eye? And he says, oh no, can't do that. Radio's told us not to.
It's all the stuff that Dad's Army Series 1 does really well.
Yes.
Because it's more grounded and then it becomes more farcical as it goes along. It really did remind me of that. This movie does sometimes a better job of reminding the audience that, Britain is in trouble in 1940 than Dad's Army sometimes does. But that's another argument for another day.
Yeah, but as you've already said, like my final thoughts on it are, it's special. There's that classic animation. There's the elements of comedy. The musical numbers are good, and I'm not even a musical kind of person. No. There's lots of fascinating representations of evacuees, Duke, as we've already mentioned, the Home Guard. Just a really interesting little movie, and of course, Angela absolutely knocks it out of the park. One of the greats.
Yeah. So what better way to end? So we're really glad that everyone sort of really wanted us to tackle it, because I don't think we would have if the fans.
No, it would have been a little bit longer. I think we probably would have got to it eventually. But yeah.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter. You can find us on TikTok now as well. For the entire back catalogue of the podcast, go to fightingonfilm.com, and we'll catch you next week.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone.